Today, something extraordinary is happening above us. For a few moments, the light itself will disappear. Millions will look toward the same sky, but not everyone will hear the same message. Because perhaps this moment did not find you to predict your future. Perhaps it found you to reveal what you are still carrying from your past. When the light returns, the world will continue exactly as before. The question is whether you will. Before the light returns, there is one part of your identity you must decide whether to bring back with you. There are moments when life gives us an interruption. Not an answer, not a miracle, an interruption. And a moment in which the pattern breaks long enough for you to notice that it was a pattern. Most days do not feel like that. Most days move quickly. You wake, remember what needs to be done, reach for the phone, return to the familiar concerns, repeat familiar conversations, think familiar thoughts, and continue inside a life that seems to have already explained itself. You know who you are supposed to be. You know what you are worried about. You know what has disappointed you. You know what you believe is possible. You know the story. And because you know the story so well, you rarely notice how often you are still telling it. Then something unusual happens. The sky changes. The ordinary source of daylight is covered. People stop walking, traffic slows, conversations pause. Strangers look upward. For a few moments, something that was always there becomes noticeable, because it is no longer available in the same way. This is what interruption does. It makes the familiar visible. And perhaps that is why this moment can matter to you. Not because an eclipse is going to erase your past, not because darkness in the sky will force money into your account, place love at your door, heal every wound, or decide your future for you, but because there are moments when a symbol arrives with enough force to help you do something you have postponed. To stop, to look, to notice what has been returning with you every morning. You may say that you want a new life, but every new life has to meet the person who wakes up tomorrow. And if that person thinks the same thoughts, speaks the same private language, expects the same disappointment, rehearses the same wounds, obeys the same fear, and protects the same identity, then even a new opportunity may be translated into an old experience. This is the difficult truth at the center of this book. Before you ask for a different life, stop rehearsing the person who keeps recreating the old one. Do not rush past that sentence. You may have spent years trying to change circumstances while carrying the same inner narrator into every circumstance. A new job, but the same fear of being exposed. A new relationship, but the same expectation of abandonment. More money, but the same shame, avoidance, or panic. A new goal, but the same private sentence that says you never finish anything. A new beginning, but the same identity waiting at the door to explain why it will probably end the same way. This does not mean circumstances do not matter. They matter deeply. It does not mean you created every hardship through thought. You did not. It does not mean pain was imaginary. It was not. It means that what happened to you and who you repeatedly become in response to what happened are not exactly the same thing. One is history, the other is rehearsal, and rehearsal can change. So as the light disappears today, do not ask only what you want to receive. Ask what you are willing to stop rehearsing. Because the most important thing you leave in the darkness may not be a person, a mistake, a fear, or a memory. It may be the identity that has been using all of those things to keep introducing you to yourself. And when the light returns, we will come back to one question. Who comes back with it? Part 1, the day the light disappears. There is something strange about ordinary light. You live inside it without thinking about it. Morning enters the room. Buildings appear. Faces become visible. Roads, windows, trees, dust, water, skin, pages, screens, everything takes its place beneath illumination. And because it happens every day, it becomes almost invisible to attention. You notice light most clearly when it changes. The same is true of identity. The version of you that appears every morning may feel so normal that you do not notice the moment it arrives. It arrives as a mood before a thought has been completed. It arrives as a familiar tension in the body. It arrives in the speed with which you check a message. It arrives in what you expect when someone becomes quiet. It arrives in what you assume when you look at your bank account. It arrives when you think about your age. It arrives when someone offers an opportunity, and the first response is not curiosity, but a list of reasons you are probably not ready. This is the hypnosis of the ordinary. Not hypnosis in the theatrical sense, repetition. The mind learns what to expect, the body learns what to prepare for, attention learns what to notice, memory learns what to retrieve, behavior learns which route requires the least conscious effort. Eventually, the familiar begins to feel like truth. A repeated life acquires the authority of inevitability. This is why extraordinary moments can be useful. They interrupt prediction. For a few minutes, the world does not look the way you expected it to look. And when prediction breaks, attention wakes up. Awe has this quality. It makes the mind larger than its usual concerns for a moment. Something exceeds the frame. Something cannot be reduced immediately to the normal routine. That does not automatically make a person wiser, but it creates an opening. An opening is enough. Imagine millions of people stopping at once and looking towards something that has been above them every day of their lives. The sun did not suddenly become important. Attention changed. This is the first lesson of the eclipse. What has always been present can become visible when the pattern around it is interrupted. Now turn that inward. What has been present in you for so long that you no longer notice it? What sentence, what expectation, what role, what fear, what loyalty, what argument, what prediction, what identity? If life stopped for one moment and you could not carry everything forward, what would you leave behind? Do not answer with an object. Do not say the old house, the old job, the old relationship, the old city. Those may matter, but go deeper. What would you leave behind inside yourself? Perhaps the need to prove that you were right to be hurt. Perhaps the belief that difficulty makes you deserving. Perhaps the expectation that people always leave. Perhaps the habit of using age as a verdict. Perhaps the role of being the one who must save everyone. Perhaps the identity of being overlooked. Perhaps the fear that if you become visible, someone will punish you for it. Perhaps the private belief that peace is temporary and trouble is more trustworthy. Most people think of change as movement towards something, but every movement towards something is also movement away from something. The difficulty is that we often want the destination without releasing the identity that belongs to the old location. We want freedom while remaining loyal to the habits of captivity. We want love while remaining loyal to self-abandonment. We want abundance while remaining loyal to panic. We want confidence while remaining loyal to the demand for approval. We want a new beginning while remaining loyal to the biography that says, beginnings never work for us. This is why an interruption matters. It gives you a temporary place where loyalty can be examined. Not loyalty to people, loyalty to identity. There is a part of the human mind that mistakes familiarity for safety. Even a painful pattern can feel more manageable than an unknown possibility. At least the old disappointment has a script. At least the old relationship has familiar rules. At least the old fear tells you what to expect. At least the old identity knows its lines. The unknown does not, and that is why the unknown can feel like darkness. You are no longer standing fully inside the old story, but the new story has not become believable yet. There is no evidence. There is no applause. There may be no external change at all. Only interruption. That is enough for the first step. Because the purpose of interruption is not to tell you who to become, it is to make the automatic visible. So today, as the light changes, let yourself notice the things you usually call simply me. The reaction that arrives before choice, the sentence that appears before evidence. The conclusion that returns before the day has had a chance to become different. Notice it without attacking it. You are not gathering evidence for self-hatred. You are gathering evidence that the familiar is a pattern. And if it is a pattern, it is not the whole of you. But there is something far more difficult to leave behind than a memory, a person, or a mistake. It is the identity built around them. And that identity is not maintained only by the past. It is rebuilt in the present. Every morning. Part 2. The self you rebuild every morning. You wake before the world has fully entered the room. For a few seconds, perhaps, there is no story. Then memory begins. The name, the responsibilities, the unfinished task, the person you are waiting to hear from, the number in the account, the body you live in, the age you are, the promises you broke, the promises other people broke, the things you hope will happen, the things you fear will happen again. Within minutes, the familiar character has returned. This return feels natural, because it is made of memory. But memory is selective. It does not present the entire truth of your life every morning. It presents a working model, a practical collection of conclusions that help you move quickly. I am this kind of person. People are like this. Money works like this. Love works like this. Life tends to do this to me. These conclusions reduce uncertainty. They also reduce possibility. James Allen wrote about the relationship between thought and character. William James explored the power of habit and attention. Different traditions use different language, but the practical observation is familiar. What we repeatedly think, attend to, and do becomes easier to repeat. The important word is easier, not inevitable. Easier. That distinction matters. The old identity has an advantage because it is practiced. It knows the route. You do not have to motivate yourself to become the person you have been for 10 years. The identity is already prepared. The emotional muscles are trained. The explanations are memorized. This is why people can sincerely want change and still return to the same pattern. They are not necessarily lying about the desire. They are often underestimating the strength of rehearsal. Imagine someone who says, "I want to be more confident," but every morning they remember the embarrassment from years ago. They compare themselves before they begin. They ask what everyone else will think. They delay sending the work. They rehearse criticism before it arrives. They call the hesitation realism. The desire for confidence may be genuine, but the rehearsal belongs to another identity. Or imagine someone who says, "I want financial peace," but they avoid looking at numbers because looking creates shame. They tell themselves they are terrible with money. They make decisions while emotionally activated. They spend for relief and then punish themselves for spending. They interpret one difficult month as proof of a permanent condition. Again, the desire is genuine. The rehearsal is stronger. Or someone who wants healthy love. They say they want mutuality, but they remain fascinated by uncertainty. They become most attached when the other person becomes unclear. They confuse anxiety with chemistry. They accept ambiguity that would be obvious to them if it were happening to a friend. They give more when they receive less, because the old identity understands pursuit better than peace. A new life can arrive and still be translated through an old self. This is why circumstances alone do not explain repetition. Sometimes the circumstances change, and the person recreates the emotional architecture. Different face, same abandonment. Different job, same invisibility. Different city, same belief that there is nowhere to belong. Different income, same scarcity. Different goal, same inability to finish. The pattern can travel. That is the part many people do not want to hear because it sounds like blame. It is not blame. Blame asks who deserves punishment. This asks where your leverage is. You did not choose every belief you carry. Some were given to you before you could question them. Some were learned from people who were frightened themselves. Some were built after real betrayal. Some formed because they helped you survive. Some still contain useful information. But an identity can be understandable and still be outdated. You may not be trapped in your life. You may be loyal to an identity that knows how to recreate it. Loyalty does not always feel noble. Sometimes loyalty sounds like, "This is just who I am. I have always been this way." People like me do not get that far. I know how this ends. I should not get my hopes up. At my age, it is too late. With my history, what do you expect? These sentences protect continuity. Continuity feels like selfhood, and that is why change can feel strangely disloyal. If you stop being the responsible one, who are you? If you stop being the rejected one, what happens to the story you have told for years? If you stop being the one who struggles, will people think you had it easy? If you stop carrying anger, does that mean what happened no longer mattered? If you stop expecting betrayal, are you becoming naive? If you stop calling yourself unlucky, do you have to face the choices that are now yours? Identity does not only tell you what you can do, it tells you what you are allowed to stop being. This is why real change can involve grief. You are not only moving toward a future, you may be releasing a character that once made sense of the past. And characters survive through repetition. Every morning you remember what they remember. You predict what they predict. You defend what they defend. You call their reactions your personality. Then you wonder why the future keeps feeling familiar. What if the life you are trying to escape is being rebuilt every morning by the identity you keep remembering? Do not answer quickly. Look at the first hour of your day. What arrives before conscious choice? Comparison, scarcity, urgency, resentment, fear, the need to be needed, the need to be chosen, the belief that you are behind, the sense that everything must be difficult? The first hour often reveals the identity more honestly than the goals written in a notebook. Goals describe who you hope to become. Habit reveals who is currently rehearsing. And the identity you rehearse has a primary instrument. A tool so constant that you may not even recognize it as a tool. It is the conversation no one else can hear. Part 3. The conversation no one else can hear. There is a voice you have heard more than any other voice in your life. It has been present in empty rooms, traffic, showers, sleepless nights, waiting rooms, elevators, long walks, celebrations, arguments, mistakes, and mornings when no one else knew what you were thinking. Your own. Not the voice you use in public, the private one. The one that comments before you can edit it. The one that says what you would never say in a speech. The one that interprets. The one that predicts. The one that introduces you to yourself. You may spend 10 minutes a day repeating affirmations and 16 waking hours repeating an identity. Which repetition do you think becomes more familiar? This is why self-talk matters. Not because every sentence has magical power, because repeated language gives shape to expectation. Expectation influences attention. Attention influences behavior. Behavior creates evidence. Evidence strengthens language. The loop becomes self-confirming. I always ruin things. So you become anxious when something is going well. Anxiety changes how you behave. You overcheck, overexplain, withdraw, test, or act impulsively. The relationship becomes strained. Then the voice says, "See, I always ruin things. People like me never get ahead." So you dismiss the opportunity before fully exploring it. You prepare less because part of you expects rejection. You avoid asking because asking would make the possibility real. The opportunity passes. See? People like me never get ahead. Money never stays. So money becomes emotionally charged. Looking becomes uncomfortable. Planning feels like judgment. You make short-term decisions to escape the feeling. The result strengthens the sentence. See? Money never stays. The language does not float above life. It participates. Neville Goddard spoke often about inner conversations and assumed states. Joseph Murphy wrote about suggestion in the subconscious mind. Florence Scovel Shinn placed unusual emphasis on spoken language, expectation, and belief. You do not have to accept every metaphysical claim made by any of them to recognize one practical truth. What you repeatedly say, inwardly, becomes familiar enough to feel natural. And what feels natural often governs what you tolerate, attempt, avoid, notice, and repeat. Try something now. Complete this sentence without thinking too much. I am the kind of person who... What appeared? Maybe something positive. Maybe something painful. Maybe nothing clear. Try again. I am the kind of person who always... Now listen. Do not improve the answer. Do not make it spiritual. Do not choose what you wish were true. Notice what the mind supplied before you had time to manage it. Whatever appeared first may tell you more about your future than many of the goals you have written down. Because goals live in intention. Identity lives in automatic language. Listen for categories. I am. I always, I never, people like me, money is, love is, life is at my age, because of my past, with my luck. This is just how I am. These phrases are often containers for old conclusions, and old conclusions are dangerous when they disguise themselves as facts. I always fail. Always. No one supports me. No one. Nothing ever changes. Nothing? The private voice loves absolutes because absolutes make uncertainty disappear. Always, never, everyone, no one, everything, nothing. An absolute sentence can feel emotionally satisfying because it closes the case. It also closes possibility. Exact language reopens it. So instead of I always fail, perhaps the truth is, I have quit several things when discouragement became strong. That is different. Now there is something to work with. Instead of no one loves me, perhaps the truth is, I am lonely, and I have sometimes remained attached to people who could not meet me fully. Different. Instead of "I'm terrible with money," perhaps the truth is, I avoid financial information when I feel ashamed, and avoidance has consequences. Different. Instead of "I am too old," perhaps the truth is, I am afraid of being a beginner at this age. Different. Exactness turns identity back into behavior. Behavior can change. This is why the old inner language often resists precision. A total identity requires no specific action. If I am simply broken, there is nothing to repair except the whole self. If I have a habit of abandoning my needs when I fear rejection, now there is a moment to notice. If I am simply unlucky, there is nothing to examine. If I repeatedly ignore information, avoid asking, and wait until opportunities feel safe, now there are choices. This is not about blaming yourself for every result. It is about refusing to make identity broader than the evidence. There is another category of inner speech to notice, the sentence after desire. I want to start something new, but I want love, but I want more money, but I want to move, but I want to be seen, but everything after the word "but" often contains the real rehearsal. But I am too old, but the economy, but no one will care, but people like me do not get opportunities like that, but I always choose the wrong person, but I have tried before, but I do not know enough. But what if they laugh? Desire speaks once, identity answers all day. This is why manifestation can become frustrating. A person visualizes for 10 minutes and then spends the rest of the day speaking as the version of themselves who expects denial. They say they are available for abundance while treating every number as danger. They say they are worthy of love while rehearsing why they will probably be left. They say they trust themselves while asking 5 people to approve every meaningful decision. They say a new life is coming while introducing themselves to every morning with the old biography. The problem is not that the affirmation was imperfect. The problem is that the opposing identity received far more rehearsal. So the goal is not to become the police of every thought. That would create another prison. The goal is to hear the language that keeps becoming identity, especially the language that feels too obvious to question. The old world stays alive through sentences. There is one more reason private language is so powerful. It usually appears before you know you are choosing it. A person can spend years saying, "I just know how people are," when what they really know is how their own nervous system has learned to interpret people. They can say, "I am being realistic," when realism has quietly become the habit of giving negative predictions more authority than positive evidence. They can say, "I know myself," when what they know best is the version of themselves that has been rehearsed most often. This is why awareness must come before replacement. If you rush to correct every sentence, you may miss the structure beneath it. Suppose the mind says they are probably losing interest. Do not immediately answer, "No, they love me completely." First ask, what identity needed to predict rejection before there was enough information? Perhaps the answer is not that you are negative. Perhaps the answer is that uncertainty once became associated with abandonment. Now you have learned something useful. Or the mind says, "This opportunity is probably too good for someone like me." Before replacing it, notice the category, someone like me. What kind of person have you placed yourself among? Who taught you the category? What does belonging to that category allow you not to risk? The sentence may be protecting you from disappointment by rejecting yourself first. That is why listening is not passive, it is investigation. For one day, imagine that every automatic sentence is leaving a fingerprint. Do not arrest the thought. Do not punish the speaker. Just collect the prints. Where does the voice become absolute? Where does it become cruel? Where does it become prophetic? Where does it pretend to know what another person thinks? Where does it turn one event into an identity? Where does it make the future pay a debt to the past? You may discover that the most exhausting part of your life is not always what is happening. Sometimes it is the commentary that begins before, continues during, and survives after what happened. The event ends. The inner conversation keeps it active. The person leaves the room. The argument continues in imagination. The opportunity passes. The mind rehearses what should have been said. The mistake is repaired. The identity keeps using it as evidence. This is how yesterday remains emotionally present long after yesterday is over. And this is why changing inner speech is not cosmetic. It is one way of deciding which experiences continue receiving life through repetition. But there is a reason those sentences can be difficult to release. Some of them are not only beliefs, they are monuments to pain, and to stop repeating them can feel like betraying what happened. Part 4. The identity built from pain. Some identities are built from desire, others are built from survival. The rejected one, the betrayed one, the overlooked one, the poor one, the abandoned one, the unlucky one, the person who always has to struggle, the person who must never need anyone, the person who must keep everyone happy, the person who cannot relax because danger follows relaxation. These identities do not begin as philosophy. They begin as adaptation. Something happens. The mind tries to understand it. The body tries to prevent repetition. A conclusion is formed. I was left. Therefore closeness is dangerous. I was humiliated. Therefore visibility is dangerous. Money disappeared. Therefore money cannot be trusted. I was ignored. Therefore I must become indispensable. I was controlled. Therefore dependence is dangerous. I was praised only when I performed. Therefore worth must be earned. The conclusion may have made sense when it was formed. It may even have protected you. That is what makes release complicated. People often imagine healing as defeating the old self, but the old self may believe it saved your life. If you attack it, it defends itself. If you shame it, it produces more shame. If you call it weak, it reminds you of everything it endured. This is why there is another way to approach identity built from pain. Respect the intelligence of the protection without granting it permanent authority. You learned to expect disappointment because disappointment hurt less when anticipated. You learned not to ask because rejection hurt less when avoided. You learned to control because uncertainty once felt unbearable. You learned to become useful because usefulness created belonging. You learned to remain angry because anger kept grief from becoming overwhelming. You learned to stay small because visibility had consequences. These were not random failures of character. They were strategies. But a strategy can outlive the emergency that created it. Then protection becomes prison. Carl Jung used the language of the shadow for parts of the personality that are rejected, hidden, or pushed outside the conscious identity. The idea is useful here because pain often creates a narrow self-concept. I must be strong, therefore I cannot need support. I must be kind, therefore I cannot be angry. I must be independent, therefore I cannot want tenderness. I must be responsible, therefore I cannot rest. I must be successful, therefore I cannot admit fear. Whatever does not fit the identity goes underground, but underground does not mean gone. A rejected fear can become control. A rejected need can become resentment. A rejected ambition can become envy. A rejected anger can become exhaustion. A rejected grief can become endless busyness. A rejected desire for love can become the performance of not caring. This is why you cannot release what you refuse to look at. And it is why positive language alone may not be enough. You can say, I am worthy, while a hidden part still believes that being fully seen leads to rejection. You can say, I am abundant, while a hidden part believes money makes people selfish, unsafe, responsible, envied, or morally compromised. You can say, I am ready for love, while a hidden part believes intimacy means losing freedom. You can say, I am powerful, while a hidden part believes power makes you like someone who once hurt you. The contradiction is not stupidity, it is protection. Ask yourself one uncomfortable question. What do I fear would happen if I actually became the person I say I want to be? Not what do I hope would happen, what do I fear? If you became financially stable, what responsibility would become unavoidable? If you became visible, whose judgment would you finally have to face? If you entered a healthy relationship, what old explanation would no longer be available? If you became disciplined, what dream would become real enough to fail publicly? If you stopped rescuing everyone, who might be disappointed in you? If you became peaceful, what identity would lose its purpose? Every desired life has a cost, not punishment. Cost, responsibility, visibility, uncertainty, loss of familiar roles, the courage to be misunderstood, the grief of admitting that years were spent protecting something that no longer needs protection in the same form. This is where people sometimes cling to pain, because releasing identity feels like denying history. If I stop being angry, does that mean what they did was acceptable? No. If I stop calling myself abandoned, does that mean I was never left? No. If I stop calling myself poor, does that erase the years of scarcity? No. If I stop calling myself broken, does that mean I was never hurt? No, healing does not require you to deny what happened. It requires you to stop asking what happened to decide who you must remain. A memory can remain true without remaining central. A wound can deserve care without becoming a name. A betrayal can teach discernment without becoming a prophecy about everyone. A loss can matter without turning loss into your permanent relationship with life. The person you were does not need to be humiliated in order to be released. Thank the protection. Then update the contract. You kept me alert. You helped me survive. You prevented pain when I did not know another way. But I no longer need this protection in this form. That sentence contains more maturity than war. War keeps the old self important. A contract can expire quietly. And perhaps this is what the approaching darkness is for. Not to destroy identity. To stop illuminating it for a moment. To enter a space where the old story is not being attacked, defended, explained, or repeated. A space where you do not rush to become powerful. You simply stop rehearsing what has already been rehearsed enough. Part Fee, do not rush to become someone new. Most people begin transformation by adding a new affirmation, a new plan, a new goal, a new image, a new promise, a new version of themselves described in bright language. But there are moments when addition is not what you need. You need absence. You need enough silence to discover what remains when the old story is not being fed. Do not rush to become someone new, not yet. You have spent years telling yourself who you are. For a moment, stop answering. The darkness between identities is uncomfortable because the old identity knows how to occupy space. It knows what to worry about. It knows who to blame. It knows what to check. It knows which memory to reopen. It knows what disappointment to predict. It knows how to turn silence into a problem. The new identity does not know its lines yet. That is why the empty space can feel like confusion. Who am I if I stop being angry? Who am I if I stop chasing? Who am I if I stop proving? Who am I if I stop calling myself behind? Who am I if I stop making pain the first explanation? You do not have to answer immediately. The question itself is freedom. The eclipse offers a perfect symbol. The light disappears. Not because the sun has been destroyed. Not because morning was a lie. Not because darkness has won. The light is temporarily hidden. Not everything you cannot currently see has disappeared. Remember that. You may not be able to see the new version of your life yet. You may not have evidence. The money may not be there. The relationship may not exist. The opportunity may not have appeared. The body may still be healing. The direction may still be unclear. Absence of visibility is not proof of impossibility, but do not use that idea to escape reality. Use it to stop demanding that every possibility prove itself before you are willing to relate to life differently. There is a period in every meaningful change when the old pattern has been interrupted and the new one has not yet become normal. That period feels empty. People often run from it. They stop contacting the person who hurts them, then confuse the silence with love and return. They stop overworking, then confuse the absence of exhaustion with uselessness and create another crisis. They stop seeking approval, then confuse quiet with invisibility and start performing again. They stop worrying, then feel irresponsible, because anxiety used to feel like preparation. The empty space exposes what the old behavior was regulating. That is why it is valuable. When you stop the pattern, what feeling appears? Loneliness, fear, boredom, guilt, uncertainty, shame, the need to be reassured? Do not rush to remove the feeling. Let it reveal the hidden bargain. Perhaps the old relationship gave you temporary relief from being alone. Perhaps overworking gave you relief from feeling unimportant. Perhaps spending gave you relief from feeling deprived. Perhaps worry gave you relief from uncertainty, because at least worry felt like doing something. Perhaps checking gave you relief from not knowing. When the behavior stops, the state becomes visible. This is the darkness between identities. You are seeing what the old self was doing for you. Do less here. Do not make a list of 20 things to manifest. Do not perform a spiritual identity. Do not rush to announce that you are transformed. Do not demand a sign. Do not force yourself into exaggerated certainty. Let the old conclusion become quiet. Before you ask for a new life, stop rehearsing the old one. You may notice the mind reaching for familiar material. Why did they do that? Why am I like this? Why did I waste so much time? Why does nothing happen for me? Why did I not start earlier? Some questions are useful. Others are simply old rooms with question marks on the door. You have visited them enough. Silence does not mean you have found the final answer. It means you are refusing unnecessary repetition. For a few moments, let the past exist without explaining the future. Let the body breathe without turning sensation into prophecy. Let desire exist without converting it into panic. Let uncertainty remain uncertainty. You do not need to fill every empty space with a conclusion. There is awareness beneath the role. There is a part of you that can observe the sentence without becoming the sentence. The thought appears, I am always behind. And something in you can notice it. The feeling appears, I am afraid. And something in you can remain present without immediately obeying it. The memory appears, and you can allow it to be memory rather than command. This is not detachment from life, it is detachment from compulsory interpretation. The old self was not invincible, it was uninterrupted. That may be the most important thing you discover in the darkness. You do not have to defeat an identity that has been rehearsed for years in one dramatic moment. You only have to create enough interruption for another response to become possible. Soon the light will return. Before it does, you will choose something. Not a grand fantasy, a state, a direction, a way of being that can begin before external evidence is complete. And then we will ask the question this entire journey has been preparing you to answer. Who comes back? Part 6. Who comes back? The darkness is temporary. That is what gives it meaning. The light will return, the world will become familiar again, the same roads, the same phone, the same home, the same account, the same body, the same unfinished work, the same people, the same questions. And that is exactly why the decision matters. Who comes back, not what do you want. Who comes back? Stop asking what you want to receive for a moment. Ask who you would need to become for that reality to feel normal. This changes the entire meaning of manifestation. Suppose you want money. Do not begin with the number. Ask what the number represents. Freedom, safety, choice, relief, generosity, dignity, status, revenge. Be honest. Then ask, who naturally lives from the state beneath that desire? If the state is provision, perhaps that person looks at numbers instead of avoiding them. Perhaps they learn what they do not know. Perhaps they create value consistently. Perhaps they ask, negotiate, save, plan, receive, and make decisions without turning every number into a verdict about worth. Perhaps they stop using spending to regulate shame. Perhaps they stop waiting for money to make them feel responsible and begin practicing responsibility before the result arrives. That is identity-level manifestation. Suppose you want love. Do not begin with a face. Ask what the relationship represents. Mutuality, belonging, tenderness, being seen, being chosen, peace. Then ask who naturally lives from that state. Does that person chase mixed signals? Do they audition for affection? Do they abandon boundaries to keep access? Do they interpret every silence as rejection? Or can they desire deeply without begging, communicate without controlling, receive affection without suspicion, and leave what requires self-abandonment? Suppose you want confidence. Do not ask how to feel fearless. Ask who acts before certainty, who sends the work while still feeling exposed, who can receive correction without collapsing, who can make a decision and remain responsible for adjusting it. Suppose you want peace. Who lives that life? Not someone who never encounters conflict, someone who stops turning every quiet moment into a rehearsal of conflict. Someone who can let another person be disappointed without converting disappointment into danger. Someone who knows when explanation has become self-abandonment. Suppose you want purpose. Who lives that life? The person collecting ideas about meaning, or the person willing to protect 1 hour of meaningful work before applause exists? This is where manifestation becomes practical. Choose one desire, one, not 10, then identify the state beneath it. If you want money, perhaps the state is provision. If you want love, perhaps the state is worthiness or mutuality. If you want healing, perhaps the state is restoration. If you want confidence, perhaps the state is self-trust. If you want change, perhaps the state is permission. If you want a new direction, perhaps the state is guidance. Choose one root state. Now choose one short scene that implies the state is real enough to live. Keep it simple. If the state is provision, perhaps you see yourself opening the account calmly. Not screaming, not crying, with relief. Calmly. Perhaps you pay something without panic. Perhaps you make a decision from order rather than fear. If the state is mutual love, perhaps you imagine sitting beside someone and noticing that your body is relaxed. You are not performing. You are not scanning. You are not trying to secure the next moment. You are simply there. If the state is self-trust, perhaps the scene is after the decision. The application sent, the boundary spoken, the appointment made, the work submitted, the call completed. If the state is restoration, perhaps you imagine cooperating with care, following the treatment, moving with more ease, resting without contempt, treating the body as an ally rather than an enemy. Now let the scene carry feeling. Do not force intensity. Feeling does not mean spiritual fireworks. Often the most powerful feeling is normality. Of course, respect belongs here. Of course, I can learn this. Of course, I can receive support. Of course, I can make a decision and repair if needed. Of course, a peaceful relationship with money is learnable. Of course, love does not have to feel like panic. Normality matters because the old identity became powerful by becoming ordinary. The new one must also become ordinary. There is a simple test for the scene you choose. After imagining it, ask, does this image make me more willing to meet reality or less willing? A useful scene should deepen participation. If you imagine financial peace and then feel more willing to look at the account, learn, create, ask, negotiate, or plan, the state is becoming practical. If you imagine love and then feel more willing to communicate clearly, respect yourself, meet new people, release what is unavailable, or receive what is mutual, the state is becoming practical. If you imagine meaningful work and then feel more willing to practice, publish, study, apply, finish, or tolerate being a beginner, the state is becoming practical. If imagination makes you less willing to engage with reality because reality has not yet matched the picture, you have moved from manifestation into escape. That distinction matters. The purpose of the inner scene is not to replace the world. It is to rehearse a different relationship with the world. There is also no need to repeat the scene until it becomes emotionally exhausted. See it clearly, let it carry the chosen state, then release it. The controlling mind will want to ask whether you felt enough, believed enough, imagined enough, or held it long enough. Notice that this is simply the old identity searching for another measurement through which to declare failure. You do not need perfection here either. One sincere moment of inhabiting another state can be useful if it leads to one honest action. The action is where the new identity begins accumulating reality. Now release the root. Do not imprison the desire inside one person, one employer, one timeline, one source, one exact sequence. If you want love, do not insist that love must arrive through someone who repeatedly refuses mutuality. If you want provision, do not insist it can come only through one door. If you want purpose, do not insist purpose must carry one title. Choose the state specifically. Let the root remain open. Then ask the final question. What is the first action that belongs to this identity when the light returns? This is where manifestation stops being begging. The image is not complete until behavior knows what to do. Provision may mean opening the account. Worthiness may mean not sending the message. Courage may mean sending it. Self-trust may mean making one decision without forming a committee. Restoration may mean keeping the appointment. Purpose may mean opening the document. Peace may mean ending the argument instead of winning it. The action is the bridge between inner state and visible life. Neville Goddard often emphasized the assumed state. James Allen emphasized character and conduct. Different systems, different language, but here they meet in a useful question. What would become natural if the state were true enough to practice? Do not wait until you feel transformed. Transformation often becomes believable after behavior creates evidence. You act once, the act becomes memory. Memory becomes evidence. Evidence gives the new identity something real to stand on. This is the decision before the light returns. Not, I will become a completely different person in one afternoon. Not, everything I want must now arrive. Not, I will never feel fear again. The decision is cleaner. This is the state I choose. This is the person who naturally lives from it. This is the first action that person will take. When the light returns, let that person return with it, and leave one thing behind: the old language that keeps calling the old identity back to the stage. Because the first place the old self will return is not necessarily behavior. It will return as a sentence. Part 7. Speak from the person you are becoming. The old identity will not disappear because you made one decision. It will speak. Nothing changed. You are still the same. This is silly. Look at the evidence. Remember what happened last time. Do not get your hopes up. You cannot trust yourself. You always come back here. This is normal. A practiced voice does not forget its lines immediately. Your task is not to argue with it for hours. Your task is to stop casting it as the narrator. There are 3 forms of language to learn: old identity language, neutral interruption, new direction. Old identity language usually sounds absolute. I always, I never, I cannot. People like me, nothing ever. This always happens to me. I am just this kind of person. When you hear it, do not immediately replace it with the most dramatic opposite you can invent. If the mind says, I always fail, and you answer, I am an unstoppable genius who succeeds at everything, the distance between the 2 statements may become the loudest experience. You do not need fantasy. You need interruption. That is an old conclusion. That thought belongs to a previous pattern. I do not need to repeat it. That belonged to an identity I no longer need to rehearse. Neutral language is powerful because it creates distance without demanding disbelief. You are not saying the opposite is already fully true. You are saying the old sentence no longer deserves automatic repetition. Then choose direction. I'm learning to finish what matters. I now choose to look at the numbers before fear makes the decision. I no longer need to abandon myself to be chosen. I can be afraid and still act. I am becoming more comfortable with support. I am learning what mutual love feels like. I can make a decision and adjust if I learn something new. This is how I respond now. Direction is more useful than exaggeration. A bridge statement does not weaken the new identity. It makes movement believable. The subconscious mind, however you understand it, is constantly receiving information from repetition, emotion, attention, and behavior. You do not need to imagine it as a mystical servant obeying every sentence. Think of it as the deep system through which familiar meanings become automatic. If you constantly say, I am unsafe, even when the situation is merely uncertain, the body learns to prepare as though uncertainty and danger were identical. If you constantly say, I cannot trust myself, hesitation becomes proof. If you constantly say, people always leave, every delay becomes evidence. If you constantly say, money never stays, every expense becomes prophecy. Changing language does not erase facts. It changes the interpretation that facts are forced to carry. You can say, this expense is difficult without saying, I will never be secure. You can say, this person did not choose me without saying, I am unworthy of love. You can say, I made a mistake without saying, I cannot trust myself. You can say, I am afraid without saying, I should not act. You can say, I am grieving without saying, my life is over. This is one of the deepest forms of inner freedom. Let one event remain one event. The old identity loves total conclusions. One rejection becomes everyone. One loss becomes always. One mistake becomes character. One delay becomes destiny. The new inner language restores proportion, and it must be connected to action. If you say, I trust myself, make one decision. If you say, I am available for provision, face one financial reality. If you say, I choose worthiness, stop one form of self-abandonment. If you say, I am becoming disciplined, finish one small task after motivation fades. If you say, I choose peace, refuse one unnecessary argument. Words open the direction. Behavior gives the direction weight. This is why empty affirmations can feel useless. The mouth says one thing while conduct teaches another. The mind says, I respect myself, and then immediately negotiates the boundary. The mind says, I am responsible, and then avoids the information. The mind says, I trust myself, and then asks everyone else to decide. The contradiction is not solved by louder words, it is solved by one aligned act. There will be moments when the old language arrives faster than awareness. You will hear yourself halfway through the sentence. Nothing ever works for stop. That belonged to an identity I no longer need to rehearse. I do not know the outcome yet. I know the next action. Or, I always ruin stop. That is an old conclusion. I am learning to remain steady when something good feels unfamiliar. Or, at my age, and stop. Age is information. It does not decide whether I am allowed to begin. The goal is not perfect thought. The goal is earlier awareness. At first, you may spend an hour inside the old identity before noticing. Then 20 minutes. Then 5. Eventually you hear the sentence before it finishes. That is progress. The speed of return matters more than the fantasy of never leaving. Self-trust is not believing you will never fail yourself. It is believing that when you notice, you will return. That is a much stronger identity because it can survive real life. It can survive fatigue, it can survive a mistake, it can survive a difficult day. It can survive rejection without turning rejection into a definition. It can survive fear without making fear the final vote. The new inner language is not designed to make you feel perfect. It is designed to keep one old conclusion from monopolizing the future. Soon the light will return. The sky will look ordinary again. That is when the new language will be tested. Not in the darkness, in the familiar world. Part 8. Do not go back. The light returns quickly. That is what surprises people. The darkness that felt enormous becomes memory. The sky begins to look ordinary. People lower their glasses. They reach for their phones. They begin talking again. Traffic moves. Messages arrive. Work resumes. The extraordinary gives the world back to the ordinary. This is the dangerous part, not the darkness. Familiarity. Because the old world still knows the old you. The phone contains old habits. The room contains old habits. The relationship contains old habits. The calendar contains old habits. The body contains old habits. The same cues will attempt to call the same identity back. Do not interpret unchanged circumstances as proof that nothing happened. The bank account may be the same. The other person may be the same. The work may still be unfinished. The body may still be tired. The result may not have arrived. The first evidence of transformation is not that reality instantly rearranges. The first evidence is that the same reality meets a different response. That is the first light. The number appears, and you do not turn it into shame. The message arrives, and you do not let urgency choose the answer. The fear appears, and you still take the next honest step. The old sentence appears, and you interrupt it. Nothing outside may look different yet, but the agreement is different. This is what gives meaning to the phrase, "It found you today." Perhaps we never know why certain messages arrive at certain moments. Perhaps coincidence is enough. A coincidence does not need to prove destiny in order to become meaningful. It only needs to become a decision. You heard this today. The sky changed today. You noticed something today. Now the meaning depends on what you do when the moment is over. Do not go back does not mean never feel old emotions again. It does not mean never make an old choice. It means do not turn recurrence into identity. The old self may return tonight. It may return tomorrow morning. It may return when you are tired. It may return when someone disappoints you. It may return when success frightens you because success creates visibility. It may return when nothing appears to be happening. Do not dramatize the return. A familiar route receiving traffic is not proof that every new road disappeared. Notice, interrupt, choose again. That is enough. Protect the first evidence. You do not need to announce transformation immediately. Let it become private behavior before it becomes public identity. If you chose provision, let the first evidence be a financial action. If you chose worthiness, let the first evidence be access changed. If you chose courage, let the first evidence be the thing you did while still afraid. If you chose purpose, let the first evidence be work done without applause. If you chose restoration, let the first evidence be cooperation with care. If you chose self-trust, let the first evidence be one decision you are willing to own. Do not underestimate small proof. The old identity was built from small proof too. Every time you checked, every time you avoided, every time you chased, every time you postponed, every time you explained yourself after the answer was already clear, every time you said, "This is just who I am." Small acts became evidence, evidence became identity. Build the new one the same way. There is another temptation after a powerful moment. Surveillance. Is it working? Did I manifest correctly? Did the sign appear? Did the person text? Did the money arrive? Was the feeling strong enough? Did I do the ritual right? Surveillance returns attention to lack. Awareness is different. Awareness notices reality. Surveillance demands reassurance. You can stay responsive without checking every hour for proof. Let the chosen state guide participation. Do not turn every coincidence into a command. Do not turn every delay into rejection. Do not imprison your future inside one interpretation. You can believe in mystery and still act responsibly. You can visualize and still plan. You can trust and still read the contract. You can pray and still make the call. You can feel guided and still change your mind when new evidence arrives. This is the balance. Manifestation without responsibility becomes fantasy. Responsibility without possibility becomes resignation. You need both. The world does not have to change all at once for you to stop returning as the same person. And perhaps this is the true meaning of the eclipse as a personal symbol. The sky did not permanently change. The interruption mattered because you noticed what ordinary light had allowed you to ignore. Now the question is whether that awareness survives daylight. Tomorrow morning, the sun will rise. The old identity may rise with it, but it no longer has to be the first authority in the room. Epilogue. The next 24 hours. For the next 24 hours, keep the practice simple. Do not try to become a completely new person. Do not try to think perfectly. Do not force positivity. Do not search for signs every few minutes. Do one thing. Every time an automatic statement appears about who you are, interrupt it, especially these. I never. Nothing works. This always happens to me. I am just people like me. At my age, with my luck. When the sentence appears, notice it. Then say inwardly, that belonged to the identity I no longer need to rehearse. Nothing more is required. You do not have to fight the thought. You do not have to prove the opposite. You do not have to become emotionally dramatic. Interrupt. Then choose direction. What would the person I chose do next? Not next year, not next. Perhaps the answer is to wait before replying. Perhaps it is to look at the account. Perhaps it is to stop checking. Perhaps it is to open the document. Perhaps it is to ask for help. Perhaps it is to say no. Perhaps it is to say yes. Perhaps it is to rest before exhaustion. Perhaps it is to follow the care plan. Perhaps it is to send the application. Perhaps it is to let silence remain silence instead of turning it into rejection. The action may be small. Let it be small. The purpose is evidence. One clean act can become memory. Memory can become proof that another response is possible. During these 24 hours, notice how often urgency tries to return the old identity to power. Reply now, check now, fix it now, explain now, buy now, quit now, call now. When urgency rises, create one honest delay, not avoidance. Space. Ask, who is about to act? The old protector, or the person I chose to return as? Notice also what receives your attention. The old identity often returns through attention before it returns through words. Checking the person's page, checking comments, checking the account every hour, checking whether the result appeared, checking symptoms compulsively, checking whether someone approves. Ask whether the state you chose requires this much checking. If not, reduce it. Protect the state from unnecessary surveillance and watch the environment. Identity is not only mental, it is cued. If the phone brings comparison into the first minute of morning, move it. If one contact gives loneliness instant access to an old pattern, create distance. If important work has no protected time, give it structure. If money remains hidden until panic, create a moment to look before crisis. If medication, movement, or care depends on memory, make the environment remember for you. Small structures protect large intentions. There is one final thing to protect during these 24 hours, the meaning of delay. The old identity may expect immediate evidence because immediate evidence would relieve uncertainty. But transformation is often quieter than that. The first result may not be an event, it may be capacity. You wait without collapsing. You hear no and remain whole. You face a number and stay present. You feel fear and do not surrender the decision. You experience silence and do not chase it. You make a mistake and repair without turning it into shame. Capacity is easy to overlook because it does not always look dramatic. But capacity changes what you can sustain. A person who can tolerate uncertainty can make different decisions. A person who can receive criticism without losing identity can create different work. A person who can face money without avoidance can build a different financial life. A person who can desire love without begging can recognize a different kind of relationship. A person who can return after failure can continue long enough for skill to grow. Do not dismiss these changes while waiting for a spectacular result. The visible manifestation may come later, may come differently, or may require choices you cannot yet see. But increased capacity is already evidence that the old identity is no longer the only structure available. That is worth noticing. At the end of the 24 hours, do not ask only whether the manifestation arrived. Ask where you responded differently. Where did you hear the old sentence and interrupt it? Where did you return faster? Where did you act before certainty? Where did you refuse to abandon yourself? Where did you face something you usually avoid? Where did you let one event remain one event? Where did you stop asking the past to predict the next hour? Gather evidence. Perhaps you still felt fear but sent the application. Evidence. Perhaps you still felt lonely but did not reopen the relationship that repeatedly harms you. Evidence. Perhaps you looked at the numbers while feeling shame instead of hiding from them. Evidence. Perhaps you heard criticism and did not turn it into total identity. Evidence. Perhaps you rested without needing collapse to give you permission. Evidence? Perhaps you worked for 20 minutes instead of waiting for inspiration. Evidence. The new identity does not need to be perfect. It needs a growing archive. The old self has years of memory. Give the new self proof. And when you fail, do not make failure the old identity's victory speech. If you send the message you meant not to send, notice. If you avoid the account again, notice. If you lose the hour, notice. If you fall into the old story, notice. Then return. Self-trust is not the promise that you will never leave yourself again. It is the knowledge that you know the way back. That makes change sustainable. The darkness will pass. The light will return. Tomorrow the sun will rise as it always has, and the world may look almost exactly the same. But transformation has never required the whole world to change at once. Sometimes it begins when one person stops returning to a version of themselves whose time has already ended. You do not have to deny what happened. You do not have to become someone unrecognizable. You do not have to force a miracle. You do not have to know the entire future. You only have to stop giving the old identity unlimited rehearsal. Let the old sentence appear and pass without becoming law. Let the old fear speak without receiving the final vote. Let the old memory remain part of history without becoming the only definition of possibility. Choose the state. Choose the next act. Return when you forget. The eclipse will become memory. The sky will move on. People will go back to ordinary life. But perhaps the point was never to remain inside an extraordinary moment. Perhaps the point was to use one extraordinary interruption to notice the identity that ordinary days had made invisible. Today the light disappeared, and for a moment the familiar became strange. Let the same thing happen inside you. Let the old certainty become questionable. Let the old conclusion lose its automatic right to return. Let the person you have been become something you can observe rather than something you must obey. When the light returns, the world will continue. The question is whether you will continue in exactly the same way. If this found you today, perhaps that person is you.